Welcome to Your Vote, Your Power, the Black Community Holding the Line. Module 2. Power builds upward, the structure behind daily life. How the system is structured. Power builds up the structure behind daily life. The goal here today is to help people understand that government is not distant or abstract. It shapes everyday life, from schools and streets to food programs, healthcare, and voting opportunities. Many people believe power begins in Washington and flows downward. But actually, in practice, much of the power that people experience daily begins locally and builds upward. Communities to local government, to state government, to federal government. The systems closest to the people often shape life most directly. The main question: who actually controls the things that affect my everyday life? Many people assume the president controls most things and the federal government is the primary source of power. Yet many daily realities are shaped more immediately by school boards, county commissions, city councils, election boards, state legislatures, governors, and local agencies. These decisions influence school funding, roads and transportation, policing, housing access, healthcare expansion, food assistance programs, voting access, library systems, water systems, community development, and the list goes on. The government people feel most often is the government closest to them. Now take a moment and look at the diagram. Power builds up. Local government, the biggest chunk. State government, then federal government. The closest government impacts you first. That's local government. This is the level of government that people encounter most often in everyday life. It influences public schools, policing, zoning and housing, trash collection, transportation, utilities, libraries, parks and recreation, county hospitals, and election operations. Everyday life examples. Number one, what happens if the school board cuts a reading program? Number two, what happens if the city closes a community center? Number three, what happens if polling locations are reduced in certain neighborhoods? These are not abstract political discussions. They affect children, parents, workers, seniors, and entire neighborhoods. Again, let's take a moment. Focus on the diagram. Local government. This is where most people feel government. Key local offices such as the mayor, city council, county commission, school board, sheriff, election board. These are everyday programs influenced locally. School meal programs, after school programs, recreation centers, public libraries, neighborhood safety initiatives, public transit routes, local health programs. The government closest to the people often has the greatest daily impact. Take another moment. Look at the diagram. Local, county, community government. Take a moment and look at the diagram. State government. The state often determines what local communities can afford. Let me say that again. The state government often determines what local communities can afford. So think about your governors, your state legislators. State government strongly influences education funding, Medicaid expansion, teacher salaries, curriculum standards, what your child is being taught or not taught in schools, labor protections, prison systems, voting laws, district maps. Take a moment and think about that. Public university funding. Let's talk about school funding. Local schools are commonly funded through state budgets, property taxes, education funding formulas. This means that factors such as where people live, district boundaries, state priorities can influence class size, how many students in each class. Technology access, does every student have a computer, a laptop? Teacher retention, whether or not we're keeping the best teachers. Extracurricular opportunities and building conditions. In the wintertime, it's the heat working. In the summertime, it's the air working. Two schools may exist only miles apart, yet experience dramatically different resources in the same state. Let's talk about Head Start and early childhood programs. At the federal level, they provide major funding, support, and broad program guidelines. At the state level, the state administers and distributes the funding received by the federal government. And at the local level determines locations, where are they located, staffing, transportation access, outreach, how much the community knows about what's going on, where they are, daily implementation. Families experience locally the outcome of decisions made across multiple levels of government. The federal government funds, the state government decides how the funding is distributed, and the local level determines what's involved and how they use that particular funding. Let's talk about some summer lunch programs. The federal government provides the funding and the guidelines. State government administers and distributes the resources. Now, the local organizations, schools, churches, community centers often operate meal sites. Keep in mind, the state government issues this money to these organizations. So, in order to determine whether an organization that is extremely important to your particular community determines who the governor is and who the state legislature is. A child's lunch may begin with federal funding, but access often depends on local decisions. In speaking about our summer lunch programs, it is the governor who determines whether they will even take the federal government funding that is offered for summer lunch programs. Just a reminder, your vote, your power, the Black community holding the line, is simply a voter education course that gives you the information you need in order for you to vote for who you choose to vote for. Voting rights. Who controls access to voting? From the federal government level, they can establish protections through constitutional amendments, through federal legislation, and through court rulings. The state government often controls voter registration rules, ID requirements to vote, mail in voting procedures, district maps, early voting access. Local government typically manages polling locations. Where can I go to vote? Voting machines, staffing, and election administration. Again, take a moment, look at the diagram. Federal, state, the biggest chunk, local, county, community. Why local elections matter. Many people often skip school board elections, judicial races, county elections, and city elections. Yet these offices directly affect educational equity, policing practices, public services, voting access, local budgets. The ballot people ignore often shapes the life they live. Once more, take a look at the diagram. Federal, state, local, county, community. Separations of powers. There are three branches. You got the legislative branch, you got the executive branch, and the judicial branch at every level. Federal, state, and local. A legislative branch makes laws and approves budgets, whether that's the state legislature, whether that is your federal legislature, your Congress, or whether that is your local mayors. The executive branch implements and administers the laws, whether that's your federal with the president, whether that's the state with your governor. The judicial branch, our court systems, interpret laws and reviews constitutionality. An example, school funding. The legislative branch, whether state or federal, approves the education budgets. The executive branch, whether state or federal, implements education policy at those individual levels. And the judicial branch comes in and they can determine whether funding systems violate constitutional protections. Take a moment and look at the diagram. Federal, state, local, county, community. The separation of powers. Strong communities build strong nations. Power builds upward. Communities influence local leadership. Local leadership influences state direction. State influences national policy. Democracy is not only something that happens in Washington, D.C., it happens in neighborhoods, in schools, in counties, in churches, and in communities. It is our hope and our prayer that your vote, your power, the Black community, holding the line, will be a help to you in deciding what you want, not only your community to look like, but your state and a strong nation. This is Dr. Georgia Session. God bless.